how do you actually look at aesthetics, be it workplace, be it healthcare, be it hospitality, be it residential? What basically inspires or what drives the sense of aesthetics? If we can start from Pusha here very quickly.
Hello. Yeah, aesthetics really plays a big role, and definitely that makes or breaks the place. So I definitely believe. But the new trend is more of informal and more of rustic kind of thing. So we want to use more of natural material. So that's the way it should be. So I would really make it more flexible and things like that.
Thank you. What about you, Ritu?
Hi all. Aesthetics for me, I think would actually depend on space to space that I get to design. Lot of the aesthetics depends on the end user who's going to be using the space, and they kind of dictate the design direction. And from there, we take off and put in our inputs and our bits and make it a space which is doesn't not just work for the client, but it works for the people using the space and us as designers as well.
Thank you. How about you, Jana?
So for me, I feel over so many years of working, I've realized that aesthetics means creating a sense of well-being for a client and adhering to kind of all 5 different senses, not only sight, but also touch, the way they feel the textures, layering, using color in the right way to evoke a certain kind of emotion when you're in a certain space, also sound. So I feel that aesthetics again works when the space is very functional. So both of them, when blended together in the right way, using technical expertise, also understanding what the client's requirements are and their design languages and what their palette is, their affinity towards certain styles are, getting that into the space and blending it correctly and creating the design outcome that they will be happy with, whether it's for a personal user or for a brand or a company, is something that I feel aesthetic kind of embodies.
Wow, thank you so much. How about you, Bezat?
For me, aesthetic is all about aspiration. Okay. What appeals to us is something which is aspirational towards us. Okay, so we aspire for something, and then it becomes something that we visually connect with, correct? So if you have aspiration or you've built an aspirational value to that space, automatically the aesthetic is built to that level, right? So I always equal aesthetics to aspiration.
Wow, that's an interesting point of view. Thanks, Bezat. How about you, Gaurav?
So for me, I think aesthetics lies beyond the brief. So that is where I think, you start pushing the brief, you start pushing your limitations and, your client's limitations. And that is where that, the space of aesthetics actually, you can actually create something which is more original, which I call as aesthetics. So I think pushing the brief and thinking beyond the brief, I think that is what I would say brings out the aesthetics.
Great. So I think it can be probably summarized as, aesthetics just doesn't probably exist in a vacuum. It is always shaped up by some or the other constraints not necessarily in a negative tonality, but probably the client's brief, the aspirations, pushing the brief. Or a very interesting question, what you as an architect or a designer bring to the table when it comes to the sense of aesthetics in terms of going beyond these constraints? Can anyone take up that question? Anyone? I mean, I heard all of you saying that aesthetics is basically your response to some of the other constraints, but without those constraints, how would you look at it?
So again, I feel aesthetics is like a dream, right? Design is a dream, and there is no boundary to design. There are no rules, there's no logic sometimes. Definitely when we're talking about functionality and we're talking about those aspects, yes, they are governed by certain principles. But when it comes to aesthetics, it's also very subjective. So I remember when we were in college, we were designing without thinking. I think that would be the answer to your question, of a real life scenario where we didn't have any limitations and we could just design out of the box. So I feel bringing that childlike nature back sometimes in our work is where we don't have boundaries to adhere to.
Thank you. Interesting viewpoint. You want to say something, Beza?
I just feel that constraint is probably the wrong word. I think it's about control. What happens is that as designers, sometimes we tend to lose control, or let's say objectivity of what we want to achieve. And we start going haywire, probably sometimes overdoing or overthinking certain things, whether it's functional, whether it's aesthetic, whatever it may be. So I think it is the right to exercise control, which builds a certain value. And that sense of control is your boundary box, is what I would say. I wouldn't say that there are constraints. Okay, so there are no constraints to your thought process. The only thing is that you need to control the amount of thought or unnecessary thought that you're trying to put into a space. That's where it is.
Great. So basically the plain white canvas, constraints that shape your design, and restraint is what you bring to the table, then that all predominantly shapes the design. Thank you so much. Bringing down to the next question, I think all of you must have seen the present day workplaces. I mean, if you go to Pinterest, if you go to Google, if you probably look at any of the popular office websites like Snapshots and most of the larger publications, you probably might come across a scenario or a trend that you must have seen, that offices or the aesthetics today has broken the shackles of a regimented design. There used to be a popular thought that office has to look like a particular scenario, which probably you saw in the last presentation, how the evolution from the FLW designed office till all the way artificial intelligence and all of that. So primarily this scene or this trend seemed to have caught on since probably about a decade or so. So what do you think are the key drivers behind office design elements adopting, in certain spaces or subspaces, the trends from hospitality or probably residential or F&B, not only in terms of the aesthetics, but also in terms of the materiality, the detailing, and so on and so forth. So would you like to take that up, Jannat?
Sure. So, this is such a wonderful observation because like everyone has observed in their own practices as well, what's happened now is that there's a shift where offices are becoming more like sanctuaries of wellness, and people want their staff and their team to thrive in that environment, right? To be there longer, to experience all the different aspects of the day and have a more balanced life so that you can have work more productive. So I feel that making your workspace comfortable, warm, adopting certain principles, like you're talking about the finer nuances, like technical lighting, mimicking the sunlight. So the circadian rhythm of lighting, because we recently gone to a facility in Amsterdam, Delta Lighting, and they showed us how their office was so beautifully designed, where the huge space and it had large glass facades, and it welcomed a lot of natural light, which made the people's energies much better. And when they came there in the morning, it kind of started from a warm white, and then it started going to a daylight, and it started mimicking the sun. So these smaller, finer nuances, I think, make a lot of difference. We did an office few years back where for a multimedia company, where we did 5-6 meeting rooms, all the meeting rooms, and each of them had a different theme. So one of the meeting rooms was a ball pit with colorful balls, and the founders and their team used to come and ideate in the ball pit. So basically the idea was to do different things so that the work environment is fun. So having a games room, for example, having a F&B section there, like a beautiful cafeteria where they had a foosball table. I think that's great. We created a reading corner where people could go and decompress, take a break, And for them to sit, we had these Swiss balls, so they could stretch as well. So I'm just saying, like, these smaller, finer details in a workspace kind of just make the space more collaborative and change the energy of the space. It makes you want to stay longer. And I feel one shift after COVID is people want that sense of well-being also. They want biophilic design, they want green elements, they want light, and they do value that very much. So yeah, having that change is something that makes a difference to everyone's performance.
Thanks, Jannat. Very valid points. Bezat, would you want to add something to this? Since you predominantly come from, very bespoke residential and hospitality grade interior designs, I think I've seen some of your works in terms of the small offices and the large offices. I like that you've done. There seems to be a lot of influence of the kind of bespoke detailing that you typically do in the residential or hospitality grade scenarios, especially to the front office spaces of the offices, maybe the owner or the management areas, or probably, let's say, some of the collaborative areas. So predominantly from the selection of materiality or the overall ambience that it needs to give out, I've seen greater influences. So would you want to talk about how well that is received or where that is coming from?
You know, obviously, it first of all depends on, clients come in with saying a lot of things, correct? And their budget says something else. I personally believe that the office today is no more longer the conventional formality of hosting meetings and doing your work, right? I think with the advent of technology, communication, broader influences from the West kind of build, again, aspiration that we also need to build offices in a way where they are kind of encouraging interaction, correct, in different formats. Like, for example, what she said about having a meeting room with all these balls lying inside, right? I'd love to do that now in our office. But the point is when it comes to aesthetic, I think people are now wanting to go away from the cliche concept of where earlier a workspace was take up a workstation, multiplied into columns and rows, cabins on the side, reception, meeting rooms, and conference room, correct? I think the brief has also evolved over time, correct? And that basically changes perspective. And the reason why most people say Google and Microsoft is because they were probably one of the first trendsetters to break that paradigm and that cliche of how workspaces are perceived, correct? Residential influence or hospitality influence basically comes in from the same logic, is to reduce the formality of that space, correct? If your office is an extension of a home, or your office is an extension of a cafe, correct? So that basically gives the freedom and the opportunity for the employee to express, correct? There is less intimidation. Like I always give an example, why does an ODP restaurant not have a door? Correct? Because it's less intimidating. But if you go to a 5-star hotel, it becomes a bit more intimidating, correct? So it depends upon what you want to achieve in terms of brief, right? But I've seen, especially when you're doing bespoke offices or very high-end, when I say high-end, meaning high finish aesthetic value, right? Clients tend to look at residential and hospitality as references to pick and put into their workspace. That trend is there, but obviously on the other side, there are offices which are large format offices which can't afford that, right? So then it becomes limited to certain key areas of the space. But again, there if you see in workspace now, cafeterias, all the kind of spaces that Jannat was also talking about, is the ingenuity of how do you bring certain different elements and fuse it into your day-to-day formal functioning, right? And thereby, I mean, imagine if you're supposed to host a meeting in a meeting room full of balls, automatically your formality gets reduced because people start becoming more casual. So you start breaking the ice. So there's an icebreaker, So as a designer, you've created a space which is actually an icebreaker, so you can actually start communicating at a different level instead of it being, like the earlier day corporates where, used to wear blazers and formal pants. And now if you see when we go to meetings where we're putting our shirt outside and going like informal, casual clothes, correct? So the definition and the cliche has changed over generations. So obviously that informality into design of office spaces is something which is the need of the day, is what I feel.
I think what you're trying to say is the experiential aspects of the subspaces is sort of adopting it in a selective sort of a manner to give out either the sense of formality or informality or hospitality or XYZ kind of a scenario. Ritu, you would have something to say on this? Quick one.
Like I think all of us have already mentioned, there is a paradigm shift in the way we work now. And the generation that we are looking at currently is a generation with a very short attention span. So, and because of that, we come across clients who come to us to design their offices, which the requirement is not how many workstations I need. The main requirement turns out to be that I need this place to be a fun place. I need to be able to retain my staff. I need to be able to make this space more welcoming, more comfortable, and a space where my employees would want to spend a lot of time happily, not waiting to see the watch and when can they just buzz off. So keeping that in mind, yes, everything that has shifted, every trend that comes, every design style that it evolves with the need of the hour. And I think this trend as well of getting residential elements into your workspace is also something that is a takeoff from that. It is the need of the hour where you are looking at, there are a lot of other options, there are a lot of new organizations coming up. There are a lot of startups with a lot of young people working hard to prove themselves. And the workspace that they want to work in also has to be a space which gives them the boost, which gives them the zone, which gives them the comfort of where their creativity can kind of, go across boundaries.
Well, thank you. Pusha, I would like to ask you this. I mean, you have been practicing commercial grade architecture and interiors since almost last more than 2 decades. Basically, according to you, we have seen trends shift probably every 5 years of every probably 6 years, and what we were today somewhere around 2000 and 2023, you see an absolute paradigm shift. So the current trend, what's your commentary, whether it's here to stay or it's basically, is it just a mindless adoption of the popular trend that is currently in play, or and then who's basically pushing this trend? I mean, is it driven by the stakeholders who are the end users, or is it driven by us designers who want to basically push this particular change? So there is a three-pronged question. One is basically, is this trend here to stay? Second, who's the key driver behind this trend? And do you think that this is a passing trend or this is here to stay?
Yeah, so to me, if you are the answer to the first question would be that this is definitely going to stay for long. And and that all this is happening because the way we live now and the way we used to live earlier. So that's the reason why it's become more flexible. People are wanting more informality in their life. And that informality is also in a way helps the creativity. I would put it that way. It's not just in the field what we are, but everywhere, the informality helps. Like when you shed the boundaries, suddenly you are open and then that's the reason why I think it should be there, and that's going to be there for long. Sorry, what was the other question, what you asked?
The other question was basically who, according to you, seems to be driving this trend? Is it driven by the end users who are actually occupying this, or is it the designers who are seeing something, getting excited, and then trying to push something?
No, as designers, we always do. I think I don't know. I at least believe in this, that it's always what the trend is. You have to be in that. So you have to move with the time, and that's if you stick with certain ideas in your mind and try to push it, it never happens. The person who evolves with the time is the person who really stays in the scene, and that's the way it should be. And as designers, we should not try to limit somebody to stay or work in a space which we think it has to be. It has to be the way what the user has to be. So definitely it's an end user driven kind of a thing, and we should respect that.
Thanks. Gaurav, what do you say on this?
So I think it's more from the owner driven. I think the brand driven, because everybody is very brand conscious now. Be it a startup, be it a big agglomeration, they're all very brand conscious now. Everybody wants their culture to be reflected in the aesthetics. So I think every office has its specific culture, and I think everybody is very, very keen to reflect that in their aesthetics. And that is what I think, there is a lot of mix. You can do biophilic, you can do very, very rich kind of finished offices, you can do a very casual startup offices, but it is where you want to position your brand. The owner is very, very clear, and that I think if we can control, as Behzad said, and we can deliver, is that fine line, because there are so many tools available, right? You can have standing pods, you can have sitting pods, you can have multiple options, but what is it that the brand wants? I think that is the beacon where we need to focus, and what he wants to establish as his brand or his culture, work culture. So I think that is the strong definition, and that is how our aesthetics would be driven. And as every organization is unique, that is what is going to keep changing. So it's an interesting thing.
So what I'm trying to say is following a trend or remaining relevant by following a trend versus trying to invent a trend and take a risk. How do you strike a balance, Jannat? I mean, my Insta feed has to show that I am relevant.
The answer to this is no risk, no gain. So you have to take risks.
No, as
I need a little more prescriptive answer than that. So.
No, as I said in the start, you got to push the brief. As an architect, that's your brief. You can't become that, okay, this is what the client wants and we just give it. I think that's business. That's not aesthetics. I think we need to step ahead and push as much as we can. And that is what gets that edge into the project. So I think you cannot sleep with that it's done, it's dusted. And I guess, you have to be a little out of control. You can't be fully in control as an architect.
I mean, that's why, again, just to continue your answer, I totally agree with it. We have to push our boundaries as designers, because I feel that's the role and that's passion driven, right? So yes, there is a business angle to it, and you want your project to move forward, and you want to kind of make the client also very happy because he has a certain vision of his dream workspace, like people have for their dream home. But again, as designers, thinking out of the box, how we can use that brief, for example, but create something very unique with that, something that maybe hasn't been done before. I feel that the opposite of bravery is conforming to a certain idea or a certain herd mentality. So I feel every designer, like say all of us sitting here, we all have a very unique voice and something that is special about us, and I feel we should not lose that over time. It sometimes happens that when you're much younger and you start off, that fire is there. But with time, when you are approached with so much of data from outside, like what you said, which kind of then controls your mind and how you think, leveling that and creating and striking the right balance between what is possible, what has been done before, and what new can be done, and taking that risk is very important.
Fantastic.
That should stay forever.
Thank you so much. That's very well said. Quickly going on to the next question, since we're talking about the convergence of the aesthetical trends, typically in a social setup, the first three places are, your home, office, and then obviously the social environment like cafes or anything like that. With COVID, probably the fourth place is coming to birth, which is typically an office space, which is a culmination of all of that. Now, if we are taking from what Behzad said, probably if you're taking cues because people want to be comfortable in office too, are we running a risk that, ultimately these individual spaces will lose their charm? If I want to be comfortable, I would go home and be comfortable. If I want to probably have a good food, I'll probably go to a restaurant. Now, social is trying to experiment with it running in daytime as a workspace. I think all of us must have seen a Provoke store or some clothing company store running as a nightclub in the evening. So there are these sort of multimodal facets available. But then having culmination of certain areas looking like hospitality grade, certain areas looking like residential grade. Are we seeing some degree of charm getting lost in this whole mixology? Because office's primary purpose is the functionality, right? Ultimately, you would want people to be comfortable. You don't want to be uncomfortable, to say the least. But are we losing the charm of individual spaces? Or are we seeing too much of convergence happening around where, if someone is doing a multidisciplinary practices, offices look the same, the residences look the same, the hospitality looks the same, and so on and so forth?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because when you're planning an office space and a workspace, what drives you is also the functionality and the practicality of it, right? So even if you are introducing elements, residential and hospitality elements into your workspace, the functionality and the practicality does not go out of the window. That is still there. But given that, how do you introduce an environment which is not as regimental, and how do you introduce an environment which is more attractive to spend a lot of time over there without being uncomfortable is the point over here. So your house is a different comfort zone, your office is a different comfort zone, and just because we are getting these elements into the workspace, we are increasing the comfort zone of the people working. They spend more time in work than at home. So we're just increasing the comfort zone for them at work so that they don't want to go home soon enough.
We are spending probably equal time in our cars as well. I have not seen cars getting converted to hospitality grade aesthetics or probably residential beds and chairs coming into it. Just, jokes apart, sorry.
No, actually, I have a point here. Sorry. The office is becoming part of everything is not because of they wanted to make the employees feel cool and all that. It's more because they wanted to increase the productivity. So it's like the employees driving you to just spend all the time here, increasing their profits. So as designers, what Jannat was saying, whatever we do, we should make it informal. We should show the client that that's not the way to do it. We have to get in something different. But that doesn't mean that you make them live. There has to be a discipline. There has to be different compartments. You should feel like going home. There has to be. You cannot live in a city all the time. So even if the workplace is cool, having all kind of informal spaces, still there has to be different sections where you go home, where you go to chill out with your friends, where you work. It has to be had. So it should never be mixed together. Though everybody as the employers would want you to do that.
Anything else? Or can we move on?
So I got very touchy about the subject when it came to cars. So obviously I'm a Baba, so I love my cars. I think if you see, and I'm just giving this as an example, the way we travel, correct? Like earlier when our parents used to, for example, travel, and today the way we travel, let's say in business class, and we're sleeping, drinking, eating. If you're traveling first class, you've got actually apartments now in the sky. Etihad has launched. My life, for example, I'm spending almost 4 to 5 hours in the car, almost 3 to 4 days in a week. So I have to work there, I have to eat there, and I have to kind of sleep there as well, correct? So obviously, I benchmark my cars who can deliver that to me, right? So it's exactly a very similar formula that you apply, because I think 60 to 70% of our lifespan goes in our workspace, right? About 15-20% in a city, in a very dense city like Mumbai, will go in traveling. And the balance 10 to 15% is the only time, especially on weekdays or holidays, is when you're actually spending it at your home, right? And that is one of the reasons when we talk about all this work-life balance, etc. Obviously, you cannot replicate the emotions of home, that is your family, in a workspace, correct? That is again very socially driven, and if you actually want to build that into your office. But I think work, eat, rest, play are the key words that today workspaces should kind of cater to, because You can't be sitting for long hours on one particular desk and trying to deliver at the same consistency. That's not possible anymore today. And one of the exact reasons is what Ritu rightly said, is a short span of attention, correct? Especially with the younger lot. And that is why organizations want to build spaces which are conducive to create those opportunities for them to take a break, play, then again start working, right? Or if they have to do a call, right? Then there need to be pods where they can have their personal calls as well. I mean, for example, our own office, and you've also seen it. We have a stockbroker's office right opposite us, and they don't have space to talk, so they're all coming outside and coming right till our door front and talking about, please buy this stock, 15,000, 20,000, X, Y, Z, and we're like, and we're actually telling our security, please go back into your office. You understand?
Or might as well come into your office and give the tips properly.
Right? So, so that is lack of understanding of, from the designer's perspective, is what is needed for that particular organ. Do they need a work desk, or then you could have given at least 20 booths and cubicles for them to talk, correct? I mean, this is where, as he rightly said, is that a client may come with a brief, but it is our duty as a designer to understand and make him or her understand whether that brief is right or wrong, correct? So that is something which, as designers, and I rightly agree, that is exactly why clients come to architects, correct? And being conformist, or let's say accepting the brief on face value, can also tend to mediocrity, because I've done it. I've ticked all the boxes, and my job is done, correct? But I think that's what makes the difference between the good and the best, and that's where that line is.
Fantastic. So I think the organizers are nudging me to wrap this up. So I'm going to straight away jump to the last point. Having heard you, having heard your experiences, having heard where you came from, where we are at today. Quick adjectives from each of you, one or two adjectives. Where we go from here? Where are we going from here? What do you foresee in terms of the trend forecast? Quickly, just one or two adjectives.
I think it would be experiment and exciting.
Okay.
I would say being a visionary, that's very important to kind of forecast what's going to happen and see what's going to happen 10 years down the line, and also what you will be like, and having yourself as your hero. So being a visionary would be one. And second is being intuitive, to kind of understand and gauge the pulse of people who you're interacting with.
Brilliant. Beza?
I think for me, I mean, and these two words I carry every day in my life, so aspirational and inspirational.
Great. Gaurav?
I think it's more to disrupt. I think it's to challenge the status quo, to disrupt, and to keep moving ahead for change.
What I would say is it's evolve and adapt with the times. That's what I would say. So you have to evolve as you're moving ahead and adapt to it.
Amazing. So thank you so much. It was an amazing discussion. I think rather than, I'm very happy that all of you all as designers and forefronts or forerunners of your particular practices in the industry didn't really go about in a prescriptive manner, or rather playing oracle, as I would like to say. You rather left audience with an interesting viewpoint in terms of the approach that could be taken up, be it disruption, be it aspirational part of it, intuitiveness, a very important part. And ultimately, so that is what we have. I think for the paucity of time, we will have to park the question and answer sessions. Probably you can take it up one-on-one with the panelists here. If you want to say something, what is it that you want to say?
Since the topic was confluence of hospitality and residential, one quick question, though I am a strict believer, an office should look like an office and feel like an office. Yours does, for sure. So, why did WeWork shut down in India, not doing so good at all? We know what losses they're doing, and when they try to make the office look so cool and happy, but you know the numbers that they're doing. They had hired the best of designers. They had the best of the team to execute it. Opposite, in BKC, they have a huge facility which is not doing well. So do we do any analysis post-occupancy? It's everything looks fancy and hunky-dory before the photo shoot is done. But after the photo shoot, do we do any kind of occupancy analysis? And is there any result that we can see? Like, just one more second, 2 more minutes is, I always ask my design and architect friends that, you guys design beautifully, but does anyone, or even the rating systems, let it be IGBC, Reeds, your Griha, Terry, blah, 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 well certificate, whatever you call them. But there is no occupancy of, let's say, if he's made a building, he's made an office, you've made an office, does anyone go and ask the occupant, are you happy? The so-called new word is the happiness quotient. Are you happy in the building? No one asks that. Everything looks good on Instagram. I'm an anti-social media person, so everything looks good over there. But there is no one asking people, like a very beautiful, this I heard that architects and designers are supposed to build for humans first, then respective people. But I don't see that happening in any country. Why is that?
So I think I'll take your first question. Rest of the scenario, we are almost painting like a doomsday scenario. That's not how it is actually. So basically, I think we work pretty cool in terms of the trend and pretty cool in terms of the aesthetics. The reason of their failures are not attributable to design, according to me. It was more of real estate decisions gone wrong. One, not being able to strike the right balance between the speculative acquisition of the real estate and vis-a-vis the managed co-office or managed workspace. So for any co-working operator to sort of be stable, and thrive, there has to be an amazing balance between the speculative workspaces that they're going to build and ultimately the managed offices, which is going to be a sustained sort of an income, because speculation is speculation. So it's not the aesthetics that has gone wrong. They basically got everything right. And I think pretty much all of it is shown in that Apple documentary, which is there. So it is, to my understanding, it is the real estate decision making that has gone wrong. Having said that, we work in India seems to be doing reasonably okay compared to the other regions, and even per se the co-working industry seems to be pretty thriving. Second part was basically about the post-occupancy analysis. Yes, most of the respected firms, including us, we do post-occupancy analysis, and which has an evidence of this is where the brief came from, this is what got signed off, and ultimately this is what the softer aspects of it. And ultimately, we take great pride in making sure that the brick and mortar of the workspace is not just acting like a brick and mortar. It ultimately is doing what it is supposed to do. The primary objective of any workspace is to provide conducive environments for people and organizations to thrive from. So ultimately, as long as that objective is getting achieved, and that is showing from the post-occupancy scenarios, absolutely we are good to go from there. So, but yeah, I think two very, very valid points. The designs cannot remain in isolation. Ultimately, it has to deliver what it is set out to do. I hope that answered it.
No, you've answered the post-occupancy analysis of the building. Yes, it's done. Let it be consumption, what kind of electricity, water, that is analyzed, and you have the beam systems in place. I'm talking about human.
No, I'm talking about the
emotional
post-occupancy
quotient
analysis
of a
of the office spaces and the actual end users. There is a sample field which is available. There are standard questionnaires which are available, which you can obviously modify to suit a particular domain. Like, for example, the questionnaire would be different for an IT company from an investment bank to a data center to so on and so forth. There will be some certain set of questionnaires and then very domain-specific or industry-specific questionnaires. So yes, a lot of large practices are actually driving it. And the proof of the pudding is actually a very growing trend called workplace strategy. You must have heard this. So no more is a scenario where client gives a brief, you have a base build plan, and architects just do the layout, right? There is a workplace strategy. Designers are actually taking a deep dive into the evolution of how that company has come about, what their peers are doing, and so on and so forth, and then actually propose them that this is what the brief should be like, and not just the numbers, in terms of the quantifiable aspects as well as the intangible aspects both. So yes, workplace strategy, I think it's going to find its roots very soon. I think it was predominantly absent because of the lack of data, mainly speaking. But I think there are amazing occupancy tools, technologies available that you can actually measure these, how your workplace is actually performing, whether collaborative spaces are actually getting used, whether meeting rooms are actually getting used, what are the occupancies, which departments are using, which departments are having visitor orientation, which departments require extraordinary storage units, and so on and so forth. So it's ultimately going to be data driven, and I think we will soon see a time where the whole brief formation approach, you'll see a quantum shift into this.
Be designed for humans. It's more system driven. When an architect designs, it's more system driven, not on the perspective of how it should be designed for the human, for the employees who are working there.
Anyone would like to take that?
May I just take this?
Yeah, please,
I have
sure.
something
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
say. So I feel that, like you mentioned, Dhaval, mental health is something in India, especially, which is overlooked. We are talking about delivering at a certain time, coming to office, whether it's work, so we're in a rat race. But when it comes to, like you said, being happy, as a designer, what we can do is understand, deep dive, and research on that particular brand, and also probably, I would say, speak to the people who are working there, for example, and also understand what field they are from, what their requirements are. So whether it's an office or whether it is a hospitality project or a home, when we design, we always have a design checklist and a questionnaire. We don't have a template of designing because it's not a cookie cutter approach where one size fits all, right? Your requirements will be different, your requirements will be different, but understanding exactly what it is that you need and getting that into a space, and then again checking with you at every stage whether it meets your requirements, whether your team is going to be happy, kind of finding ways to add to that factor that you're going to enjoy the space that you're in.
That
making
is
it
always going
flexible.
to vary, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah, it's just a part of coin.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that it's very important for us to understand, go beyond the brief and understand what it is that works for you. Because what works for you might not work for me. But once I kind of understand, like a psychiatrist, of what it is that you are looking for, it is our role to deliver that. And that's when the happiness comes across. You need to thrive in the space. So yes, data systems are there, especially for larger scale projects, but then a little personal aspect and that involvement, personal attention to detail makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, but that is our job, right?
Yes.
To make space.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, for humans.
For humans,
Yes.
yeah.
Not only that, I'll add a very interesting snippet to that. I was telling this to a colleague in office, saying, in a large workspace, say a 50,000 square feet office, there are 700 desks. Client's brief is that I need 750 desks. People are trying to put the desks in an apparently non-interested sort of a manner. Ultimately, I told this colleague of mine, the desk and a chair that you're putting there is going to be someone's life. So that sort of a sensitivity needs to come into the design approach, and we definitely drive that sort of a point across very clearly, that whoever is going to sit there is going to spend 8 or 10 hours of his life in that desk.
Exactly.
Exactly. So basically that sensitivity does come in, and then everything around it, including indoor air quality, all of these are measured aspects. But the intangible aspect of it, if you are sensitive towards the fact that that table and that chair is going to be occupied by a human, he's going to thrive, he's going to grow, he's going to get promoted, he's going to build a life, all linked to that table and chair, because that is going to give him job satisfaction, that's going to give him income. So these are softer aspects of it, which no systems are going to definitely put it on paper saying that have you actually ticked all these
Sir,
boxes
it
and
should
so on.
not be constrained to just table and chair. We should have some spaces so that a person can move, right?
Yeah, obviously. I'm saying it starts
Yeah.
from tables and chairs. Obviously, there will be passages to go to those workspaces and stuff like that. So ultimately, what I'm trying to tell you is that it is not a table and chair for an architect. There are emotions attached to it. So that's all I'm trying to say. Thank you very much. Is there any question? I think you can take it up individually with the panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gaurav, Behzad, Jannat, Ritu, and Pusha. That was lovely
Thank you for
discussion.
having us.
Thank you for pearls of your wisdom. Thank you.